November 17, 1944. Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Day 89 of the deadliest American ground campaign in the European theater. At 9:47 in the morning, Private First Class Jacob Hayes pressed his cheek against frozen rifle stock. His breath came out white. His fingers were numb. 400 German soldiers were moving toward Baker Company's exposed flank. Hayes had 5 bullets. The army had forbidden his shooting position. His commanding officer had threatened him with prison. None of that mattered now. In 2 hours, this 24-year-old former garage mechanic from Boston would kill 18 men and stop an entire enemy battalion cold. But right now, lying 4 inches off the frozen ground, he was thinking about Russo. Russo, who told him yesterday the trees were killing them. Russo, who was now scattered across an oak branch somewhere behind the German lines. Hayes whispered to himself, "Not today. Not like them." He put his finger on the trigger. 19 days earlier. Days. October 29, 1944. The 28th Infantry Division had just entered the Hürtgen Forest. Command called it a routine clearing operation. 3 weeks maximum. Light resistance expected. They were wrong about everything. Sergeant Frank Russo found Hayes cleaning his rifle that evening. Russo was 31 old for an enlisted man. He had a wife named Maria and 3 daughters back in Paterson, New Jersey. He wanted to open a deli after the war. He made the best coffee in the company, somehow finding real beans when everyone else drank burnt chicory. "Jake," Russo said, "you ever feel the trees watching you?" Hayes looked up. "What do you mean?" Russo sat down. His hands were shaking. "Not from cold." "I was up in that oak today. Position Bravo 7. Good sightlines just like the manual says. But Jake, I could feel the scope moving. Every time the wind hit the crosshairs danced. I missed 3 shots I should have made. The branch was swaying." "Yeah." Russo lit a cigarette. His third in 10 minutes. "The Germans know where we are. They know we climb. They're waiting for us to shoot so they can triangulate. It's a game to them now." Hayes said nothing. He had noticed the same thing. Every elevated position was a death sentence waiting to happen. Russo inhaled deep. "The tree is killing me, Jake. I can feel it." The next morning, October 30th. Hayes was 300 yards away when the mortar round hit Russo's oak. The sound was wrong. Not an explosion. A crack, like God breaking a bone. Then silence. Then screaming that stopped too fast. Hayes ran. When he got there, Sergeant Miller grabbed him. "Don't look, don't." Hayes looked anyway. He wished he had not. That night he sat alone in his foxhole. His hands would not stop shaking. He kept seeing Russo's face from the night before. The fear in his eyes. The certainty. Russo knew. He knew, and he climbed anyway because the manual said climb. Hayes thought, the manual killed him, not the Germans. The manual. He did not sleep. November 2nd, 1944. Hayes requested a meeting with Captain Edward Foster, the company executive officer. Foster was 26 years older than Hayes. West Point graduate, clean uniform, soft hands. He had been in theater for 6 weeks and had never fired his weapon at an enemy. "Private Hayes, what is this about?" Hayes stood at attention. "Sir, I have a tactical observation regarding sniper deployment." Foster looked annoyed. "Go on." "Sir, we are losing snipers at twice the rate of line infantry. The elevated positions are compromised. The Germans have pattern-mapped every logical high ground location. They wait for us to fire, then bracket with MG-42s or call in mortars. Sergeant Russo. Corporal Bianchi's spotter. Now Sergeant McKenna. Same story every time." Foster leaned back. "And your solution?" "Private. Ground-level deployment, sir. Prone positions with modified stability systems. The forest floor provides 0 vibration, better accuracy, lower profile, harder to locate." Foster laughed. Not a kind laugh. "You want our snipers to lie in the mud?" "Yes, sir." Private Hayes. Foster picked up a field manual from his desk. Section 6, Part A. Achieve maximum elevation for superior field of fire. This doctrine was developed by experts, tested, proven. Your job is to follow orders, not to reinvent tactics based on your personal feelings about mud. Sir, the doctrine is getting men killed. Foster's face hardened. The doctrine works. Pilot error and inadequate camouflage are getting men killed. Do you understand me? Hayes felt something snap inside. Not anger, something colder. Clarity. Yes, sir, he said. I understand perfectly. He walked out knowing two things. First, Foster would never change his mind. Second, more men were going to die unless someone broke the rules. November 14th, 1944. Hill 400. The worst day yet. Hayes watched from a support position as the assault went wrong. Corporal Robert Bianchi's spotter, a 19-year-old kid named Campbell from Alabama, took a rifle grenade to his observation post. Campbell had been on the front for 4 days. 4 days. He had shown Hayes a photograph of his girlfriend the night before. Her name was Sarah. She worked at a drugstore in Birmingham. Campbell died slowly. Internal bleeding. Bianchi carried his body 3 miles through the mud. He did not speak. He did not cry. He just walked 1 foot after another until they reached the aid station. Hayes found Bianchi sitting outside the medical tent. His uniform was covered in Campbell's blood. He kept asking for water, Bianchi said. His voice was flat. Dead. I didn't have any. He asked for water, and I didn't have any, and then he stopped asking. Hayes sat down next to him. It wasn't your fault. I put him in that position. The manual said high ground. I followed the manual. Bianca looked at Hayes. His eyes were empty. The manual killed him, Jake. I killed him. Hayes did not know what to say, so he said the only true thing. Then we stopped following the manual. Bianchi laughed. A horrible sound. Foster will court-martial you? Maybe, Hayes said. But I'm tired of counting bodies. That night, Hayes started planning. He salvaged high-tension wire from a wrecked German vehicle. He found 2 sections of birch branch, thick and straight. He began modifying his Springfield rifle in secret, testing different configurations in his foxhole. The wire wrapped around the forestock created a micro-tension point. The birch branches became a crude bipod. 3 points of contact with the ground. Stable, solid, forbidden. November 16, 1944. Sergeant Ray McKenna was positioned in an abandoned log cabin attic. Standard doctrine. Elevated position. Good sight lines. After his second shot, German engineers detonated the entire structure. When they recovered McKenna's body 2 days later, Hayes did not go to look. He already knew what he would see. Another friend turned into a statistic. Another name to add to the list. That evening, Private Willie Sims came to Hayes's foxhole. Sims was 19. Nebraska farm boy. He had been Hayes's spotter for 3 weeks. Good eyes, steady hands. But tonight, his hands were not steady. Jake, Sims's voice cracked. I can't do it. Hayes looked at him. Can't do what? The tree. Sims was crying. Not sobbing. Just tears running down his face mixing with the mud. They want me to climb tomorrow. Position Delta 9. Same type of setup McKenna had. Willie, I'm not a coward. Sims grabbed Hayes's arm. I'm not. I just don't want to die for nothing. McKenna was better than me. Russo was better than me. If they couldn't survive those positions, how can I? Hayes looked at this kid. 19 years old. Should be chasing girls at a county fair. Instead, he was sitting in a frozen hole in Germany waiting to die. Something inside Hayes made a decision. Not his brain. Something deeper. You're not climbing tomorrow, Hayes said. Sims blinked. What? Report sick. Trench foot. Go to the aid station at dawn. Tell no one where I'm going. Jake Foster will. Let me worry about Foster. Hayes put his hand on Sims's shoulder. You're not going to die in a tree, Willie. Not tomorrow. Not ever. I promise. Sims stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. What are you going to do? Hayes picked up his modified rifle. Something stupid. 10:15 that night. Hayes slipped out of the company perimeter. The moon was hidden. The forest was black. He moved by instinct toward the forward sector near the German pillbox designated Agong 3. He found his spot at midnight. A half-fallen pine with thick interlocking roots. Natural cover. Low canopy. He began digging. The ground was frozen solid. Every strike of the shovel sent pain through his arms. He thought about Russo. He thought about Campbell. He thought about McKenna. He thought about Sims crying in the foxhole. 1:18 in the morning. The scrape was done, 18 inches deep, just wide enough for his shoulders. He settled into position. The rifle felt different here. Solid. Part of the earth. He dry-fired once, twice, 3 times. The crosshairs did not jump. The scope did not dance. For the first time in weeks, Hayes smiled. Let them come, he whispered. Let them all come. He did not sleep. He waited. November 17th, 1944. Dawn came gray and cold. Hayes watched Baker Company move into position through his scope. Small figures in the mist. Following orders. Walking toward exposed positions because the manual said so. At 9:40 he saw movement. Not a patrol. A wedge formation. 50 men at the point. More behind. The flanking force command had warned about. 400 German soldiers moving to cut the supply road. His radio crackled. Captain Foster's voice, all the arrogance gone. Red Dog, this is base. High volume contact. We need interdiction on our flank. Immediate. Do you copy immediate? Hayes keyed his mic. Base Red Dog. I see them. 600 yards and closing. He settled into his scrape. 4 inches off the ground. Invisible. Impossible. The lead German was an Oberfeld-Webel. Experienced. Confident. He was walking like a man who had already won. Hayes put the crosshairs on his chest. He thought about Russo, about Campbell, about McKenna, about Sims. This is for all of them, he said. He squeezed the trigger. The Springfield barked. The recoil was a nudge absorbed by the frozen earth. The scope barely moved. The Oberfeld's helmet snapped back. He dropped. Hayes cycled the bolt. 6 seconds. Another target. Another shot. Another kill. The Germans scattered, diving for cover. They looked up. They looked at the trees. They looked everywhere except down. Because no one lies in the mud. The manual says so. Hayes kept firing. In 2 hours and 3 minutes he would kill 18 men. He would stop a 400-man assault. He would save every soldier in Baker Company. And he would prove that everything the Army taught about sniper warfare was wrong. But the Germans were already noticing something impossible. Fire coming from angles that did not exist. Shots from ghosts in the earth. Their intelligence reports would soon carry a new designation. A warning passed from unit to unit in urgent whispers. Schattenfeuer. Shadow fire. They did not know what it meant. They did not know how to fight it. They only knew that something had changed in the Hürtgen Forest. Something had changed forever. In Part 2, we will see how Hayes's forbidden technique spread through the American ranks like wildfire. How German counter-sniper teams desperately tried to understand the impossible angle of fire, and how a simple piece of wire and 2 sticks of wood would be credited with reducing American sniper casualties by 39% in a single month. The manual said climb. Hayes said no. And the war would never be the same. November 17, 1944. 2 hours and 3 minutes. 18 confirmed kills. 1 man against 400. Jacob Hayes had done the impossible. He had stopped an entire German flanking force using a forbidden shooting position, and a rifle modification that violated every regulation in the United States Army. But killing Germans was the easy part. Now Hayes faced an enemy far more dangerous than any Wehrmacht battalion: the American military bureaucracy. Within 48 hours of his action at A-Gang 3, word had reached division headquarters. Not praise, not commendation, an investigation. Private First Class Hayes had disobeyed direct orders from Captain Foster. He had modified government property without authorization. He had deployed to an unapproved position. The fact that he had saved an entire company meant nothing to the men who wrote the rules. The official casualty rate for American snipers in the Hürtgen sector was still 38%. Men were still dying in trees every single day. And the Army was about to court-martial the only man who knew how to stop it. November 19, 1944. Division Headquarters. Hayes stood at attention in a room that smelled like cigarette smoke and bureaucracy. Behind the desk sat Colonel Raymond Burke, Division Chief of Staff, 53 years old, career officer. He had never fired a weapon in combat, but had signed death notifications for over 2,000 men in the past 3 months. Burke did not look up from the file on his desk. "Private Hayes, you are aware of the charges against you?" "Yes, sir." "Destruction of government property, insubordination, failure to follow lawful orders, unauthorized deployment." Burke finally raised his eyes. They were cold. "Captain Foster wants you in Leavenworth." Hayes said nothing. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Hayes thought about Russo, about Campbell, about McKenna, about the 18 Germans lying dead in the frozen mud. "Sir, I killed 18 enemy combatants in 2 hours. I stopped a 400-man flanking force. I saved Baker Company." "You broke regulations." "The regulations are killing our snipers, sir." Burke's face hardened. "The regulations exist for a reason, Private. They are developed by experts with decades of experience. You are a 24-year-old mechanic from Boston. You do not get to decide which orders to follow. With respect, sir, the experts are not the ones dying in trees." The room went silent. Hayes had crossed a line. He knew it. Burke knew it. Everyone in the room knew it. Burke leaned forward. "I could end your military career right now. One signature. You would spend the rest of the war in a cell while your friends die in the forest. Is that what you want?" "No, sir." "Then explain to me why I should not do exactly that." Hayes took a breath. This was his only chance. "Sir, in the past 3 weeks, the 28th Division has lost 14 snipers and spotters. 38% casualty rate. Almost twice the rate of line infantry. Every single one of them was killed in an elevated position. Trees, attics, church towers. The Germans know exactly where to look. They bracket us with MG-42s. They call in mortars. They have counter-sniper teams specifically hunting our high ground positions." Burke's expression did not change. "And your solution is to lie in the mud." "My solution is to use the most stable firing platform available. The ground does not sway in the wind. The ground does not give away your position. The ground absorbs recoil. In my engagement at A-Gang 3, I achieved 18 kills with 23 rounds. That is a 78% hit rate at distances up to 800 yards. The average hit rate for elevated positions in this sector is 31%. Burke was quiet for a long moment. Hayes could not read his face. Finally, Burke spoke. "You have numbers." "I have dead friends, sir. Numbers are all I have left." Burke closed the file. "Get out of my office, Private. I need to think." Hayes saluted and left. He did not know if he had won or lost. He only knew that somewhere in this building, men in clean uniforms were deciding whether he would spend the rest of the war fighting or rotting in a cell. But Hayes had not counted on one thing. Someone else had been listening. Major Thomas Aldrich was 41 years old. West Point class of 1925. He had fought in North Africa, Sicily, and Normandy. Unlike Colonel Burke, Aldrich had actually killed men. He knew what it felt like to watch friends die. He knew the difference between doctrine and reality. He found Hayes outside the headquarters building, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. "Private Hayes." Hayes snapped to attention. "Sir?" Aldrich waved him down. "At ease. I heard your conversation with Colonel Burke." Hayes said nothing. He was not sure if this was good or bad. 78% hit rate, Aldrich said. "That is impressive, if true." "It is true, sir." "Show me." Hayes blinked. "Sir." "Show me your rifle. Show me your position. Show me your technique." Aldrich's eyes were sharp, calculating. "Burke is going to bury you unless someone with rank speaks up. I am willing to speak up, but I need to see it work with my own eyes. Sir, Captain Foster specifically ordered me not to. I outrank Foster, and I am giving you a direct order, tomorrow morning. 0600, firing range behind the motor pool. Bring your modified rifle and be prepared to demonstrate." Aldrich turned to leave. Then he stopped. "Hayes, if this works, I will get you out of this mess. If it does not, I cannot help you." Hayes nodded. "Understood, sir." That night, Hayes did not sleep. He cleaned his rifle 7 times. He checked the tension on his wire modification until his fingers bled. He rebuilt his improvised bipod twice. Everything had to be perfect. One demonstration, one chance. If he failed, he would go to prison. If he succeeded, he might save hundreds of lives. At 0400, he gave up on sleep. He walked to the firing range in the darkness. The ground was frozen solid. The air was so cold, it hurt to breathe. He found a position similar to his scrape at Agang 3. Low. Hidden. Stable. He waited for dawn. November 20th, 1944. 0600. Major Aldrich arrived with 3 other officers. Captain Foster was among them. His face was smug, satisfied. He expected Hayes to fail. Colonel Burke was not there. But Aldrich had brought Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, the division sniper coordinator. Harrison was responsible for all sniper training and deployment in the 28th Division. If Hayes could convince him, everything would change. "Private Hayes," Aldrich said. "Explain your setup." Hayes pointed to his position. "Sir, this is a standard shooting scrape, 18 inches deep, just wide enough for my shoulders and rifle. The position places my scope approximately 4 inches above ground level." Foster snorted. 4 inches? You cannot see anything from 4 inches. "With respect, sir, I can see everything I need to see. And more importantly, the enemy cannot see me." Harrison stepped forward. He was examining Hayes's rifle. "What is this modification?" "High-tension wire wrapped around the forestock, sir. It creates a micro-tension point that absorbs barrel vibration. The bipod is improvised from birch branches and canvas strapping. 3 points of contact with the ground. 0 body contact during firing." "This is not standard issue," Foster said. "This is destruction of government property." "This is a 78% hit rate," Hayes replied. "Standard issue gives us 31%. Harrison held up his hand. "Enough. Private Hayes, demonstrate. Target at 500 yards. Hayes settled into his scrape. The cold seeped through his uniform immediately. His breath fogged the scope. He wiped it clear. Adjusted for windage. Found the target. Foster was watching with his arms crossed, waiting for failure. Hayes exhaled, squeezed the trigger. The Springfield barked. The recoil was a solid nudge absorbed entirely by the frozen ground. The scope barely moved. "Hit," the spotter called. "Center mass." Hayes cycled the bolt. Acquired the next target. Fired. Hit. 2 inches left of center. Another cycle. Another shot. Hit. 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 5 rounds. 5 hits. 23 seconds. Harrison's mouth was open. Foster's smugness had disappeared. Aldrich was smiling. "Again," Harrison said. "Different targets, 800 yards. Hayes reloaded. 800 yards was the extreme edge of the Springfield's effective range. From an elevated position, the hit rate at this distance was less than 15%. He found the first target, a steel silhouette barely visible through the morning mist. He adjusted elevation, held his breath, fired. Hit. The second target was partially obscured by a fallen log. Hayes had to thread the shot through a gap no wider than 6 inches. He fired. Hit. Foster stepped forward. "This is a controlled environment. The real battlefield is not a firing range." "You are correct, sir," Hayes said. "On a real battlefield, I would not have officers standing behind me talking. I would have Germans trying to kill me. And I would still hit my targets because they would be looking for me in the trees while I lay invisible in the mud." Harrison turned to Aldrich. "Major, how long has this private been using this technique?" "First confirmed deployment was November 17th, sir. 18 kills in 2 hours against a 400-man flanking force." Harrison looked at Hayes. Really looked at him. "Private, in the past month I have signed casualty reports for 14 sniper teams. 14. Every single one was killed in an elevated position. Are you telling me this could have been prevented?" Hayes met his eyes. "Yes, sir. I am telling you exactly that." Harrison was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Foster. "Captain, the court-martial proceedings against Private Hayes are suspended indefinitely." Foster's face went red. "Sir, he violated direct orders. He destroyed government property. He demonstrated a 78% hit rate at 500 yards and a 40% hit rate at 800 yards from a position that is effectively invisible to enemy observation. Those numbers are double our current averages, maybe triple." Harrison stepped closer to Foster. "Captain, I do not care about your regulations. I care about keeping my snipers alive. Do you understand?" Foster said nothing. Harrison turned back to Hayes. "Private, as of now, you are reassigned to division sniper training. You will teach this technique to every sniper team in the 28th Division. You will document the modification process. You will develop a training protocol." Hayes blinked. "Sir?" "You heard me. Major Aldrich will provide you with whatever resources you need. Wire, wood, canvas, whatever it takes." Harrison paused. "And Hayes, if this works as well in the field as it did on this range, I will personally recommend you for a Bronze Star." Hayes did not know what to say. 12 hours ago he was facing prison. Now he was being asked to revolutionize American sniper doctrine. "Yes, sir," he managed. "Thank you, sir." That afternoon, Hayes began training his first class. 12 snipers and spotters from 3 different companies. Most of them had heard the rumors about a Gang 3. Most of them were skeptical. Private Ted Harrison from the 110th Regiment spoke up first. "They say you got 18 kills lying in the dirt. My rifle jumps when I try to shoot prone. The stock moves on the uneven ground. I can't stabilize." Hayes held up his modified Springfield. "The problem is not your technique. The problem is that the rifle was designed for supported positions. When you place a wooden stock on uneven ground, it picks up every vibration, every twitch in your muscles, every heartbeat. The solution is to decouple the rifle from your body." He demonstrated the wire wrap, the improvised bipod, the 3-point contact system. "The ground is the most stable platform available. 0 sway, 0 vibration. But only if you isolate the rifle from your natural tremor. This modification creates that isolation." By evening, all 12 snipers had modified their rifles. By the next morning, they were practicing in improvised scrapes behind the motor pool. Hit rates improved immediately. 40%, then 50, then 60. Word spread fast. Underground. Unofficial. From man to man. By November 25th, every sniper in the 28th Division knew about the forest floor hide. Mechanics and armorers were being asked for high-tension wire. Supply sergeants were suddenly short on canvas strapping. Birch branches were disappearing from firewood piles. The officers did not notice at first, but the Germans did. November 28, 1944. German intelligence began receiving reports from forward units. The reports were confusing, impossible. American fire coming from impossible angles. Shooter is completely invisible. Cannot suppress with standard bracketing fire. Unable to locate position after multiple volleys. Major Werner Kaufmann, commander of a German counter-sniper team, examined 18 bodies recovered from the Egang 3 sector. The bullet trajectories made no sense. The entry wounds suggested a firing position barely above ground level. But that was impossible. No sniper operated from ground level. The manual said so. Kaufmann filed his report under a single word. Schadenfeuer. Shadow fire. But the mystery was about to get worse. Because by December 1st, shadow fire was not one man anymore. It was dozens. And the German casualty rate in the Hürtgen sector was climbing. November 30th, 1944. 2 weeks after Egang 3. The numbers told the story. Sniper casualty rate before Hayes's technique, 38%. Sniper casualty rate after adoption, 23%. A 39% reduction in 2 weeks. Conservative estimates credited the technique with saving at least 12 sniper teams, 24 men who would have died in trees. But success brought new problems. The technique was spreading faster than the army could control. Men were modifying rifles without authorization. Training was inconsistent. Some snipers were using the wrong wire tension. Others were building bipods too tall, exposing themselves unnecessarily. And worst of all, the Germans were starting to adapt. December 3, 1944. Hayes received a captured German intelligence document translated by Division G2. His blood ran cold as he read it. All units are advised that American snipers have adopted a new ground-level firing technique designated Schadenfeuer. Counter-sniper teams are ordered to prioritize low-angle search patterns. Flamethrower units are authorized for systematic clearance of dense root systems and undergrowth. Rolling smoke barrages will be deployed to obscure ground-level sight lines. The Germans knew. They did not understand how the technique worked, but they knew it existed, and they were already developing countermeasures. Hayes looked at the document for a long time. He had saved lives. He had changed tactics. He had proven the experts wrong. But now the enemy was adapting, and in war adaptation was a race with no finish line. He thought about the men he had trained, the lives he had saved, the lives still at risk. The forest floor hide had given American snipers an edge. But edges could be dulled, advantages could be neutralized. The Germans were not going to lie down and die just because one mechanic from Boston figured out how to shoot from the mud. December 5, 1944. Hayes received new orders. He was being sent back to the front. Not as a sniper, as an observer. Division wanted to know if the German countermeasures were working. They wanted to know if Schadenfeuer was still effective against an enemy that knew what to look for. Hayes packed his modified rifle, checked his wire tension one last time, looked at the forest on the map. Somewhere out there, German flamethrower teams were hunting for men lying in scrapes. Somewhere out there, counter-snipers were learning to look down instead of up. The technique had worked, but the Germans were not beaten. They were just getting started. In Part 3, the war escalates. German countermeasures force Hayes to evolve his technique under fire. A deadly cat-and-mouse game begins in the frozen forest. And a single mistake will cost American lives and threaten to destroy everything Hayes has built. The easy part was over. The real battle was about to begin. I'll write in the same style as the previous parts. Dramatic, emotional, with dialogue, short, punchy sentences for action, and focusing on character psychology and emotions rather than lengthy scene descriptions. A mechanic from Boston invented a shooting technique the Army called impossible. He proved them wrong with 18 kills in 2 hours. Division Command tried to court-martial him. Instead, they made him an instructor. Within 2 weeks, every sniper in the 28th Division knew about the forest floor hide. Casualty rates dropped 39%. American snipers were finally winning. But the Germans were not fools. They had noticed the change. They had analyzed the bodies. They had read the intelligence reports. And now they knew exactly what they were hunting. On December 3, 1944, captured German documents revealed a single chilling word: Schattenfeuer, shadow fire. The enemy had identified the technique. They were developing countermeasures. Flamethrower teams, low-angle search patterns, rolling smoke barrages. The advantage Hayes had built was about to be tested, and this time the Germans were ready. December 6, 1944, German 7 Corps Headquarters. Oberst Wilhelm Brandt stood before a map of the Hürtgen Forest. Around him sat 12 senior officers. The mood was tense, angry, confused. "Explain this to me," Brandt said. He pointed to a cluster of red marks near Wassenach. 17 men, dead, in 4 days, all from the same sector, all killed by sniper fire. Our counter-sniper teams cannot locate the shooters. Our MG-42 suppression has been completely ineffective. What is happening? Major Werner Kaufmann stepped forward. He was the commander of the division's counter-sniper unit, a hunter by trade before the war. He had killed more Allied snipers than any other German officer in the sector. "Herr Oberst, the Americans have changed their tactics." "Changed how?" Kaufmann placed a photograph on the table. It showed a shallow depression in the forest floor, barely visible. "They are shooting from ground level. Prone positions hidden in root systems and debris. Our teams have been searching the trees, the high ground, the buildings, but the fire is coming from below." Brandt stared at the photograph. "This is impossible. No sniper operates from ground level. The sight lines are too limited." "With respect, Herr Oberst, they have found a way. The bullet trajectories confirm it. Entry wounds on our dead suggest a firing position no more than 10 centimeters above the forest floor." The room was silent. Brandt turned to his operations officer. "How many men have we lost to this Schattenfeuer in the past month?" 47, confirmed Herr Oberst. "Possibly as many as 60. 47 men. Dead. Killed by ghosts they could not see." Brandt made his decision. "Kaufmann, you will develop countermeasures immediately. I want flamethrower teams attached to every forward patrol. I want smoke deployed before any advance through dense forest. And I want your counter-sniper teams retrained to search low." Kaufmann nodded. "It will take time, Herr Oberst." "We do not have time. The Americans are bleeding us dry." Brandt looked at the map, at the red marks spreading like disease across his sector. "Find these shadow shooters. Kill them. Whatever it takes." The order went out that night. By December 8th, German patrols in the Hürtgen sector had changed completely. Flamethrower teams led the advance. Smoke grenades were deployed before every movement through thick forest. Counter-snipers began searching the ground instead of the trees. The adaptation was fast, professional, deadly, and it began to work. December 10th, 1944, Private First Class. Thomas Riley was one of Hayes's first students. He had mastered the forest floor technique. He had achieved a 62% hit rate in training. He was confident, maybe too confident. Riley set up his scrape near a shattered farmhouse outside Germeter. Standard position, low profile, good sight lines. He had killed 3 Germans in the past week from similar locations. He never saw the flamethrower team. The Germans had learned to approach in silence, to spray fire into every suspicious depression, every root system, every pile of debris. Riley burned alive in his own scrape. When Hayes heard the news, he sat alone for a long time. Riley was 20 years old. He had a photograph of his mother in his pocket when he died. Sergeant Miller found Hayes behind the motor pool, staring at nothing. "It's not your fault," Miller said. Hayes did not look up. "I taught him that position. I told him he would be invisible. You taught him a technique that saved dozens of lives. And now it killed him." Hayes finally met Miller's eyes. "The Germans adapted. They're using flamethrowers, smoke, low-angle searches. The advantage is gone." Miller was quiet for a moment. "So what do you do?" Hayes thought about it. About Riley burning. About the Germans learning. About the endless cycle of adaptation and counter-adaptation that defined this war. "I adapt faster," he said. That night, Hayes began working on modifications. The original technique was no longer enough. The Germans knew to look low. They knew to burn. They knew to smoke. He needed something new. The problem was mobility. A static scrape was now a death trap. The Germans would find it eventually. Burn it. Kill the sniper inside. The solution was obvious. Painful, but obvious. Hayes would have to move. Shoot and move. Never stay in one position for more than 2 shots. Create multiple scrapes in advance. Rotate between them. It meant more work, more risk, more exposure during movement. But it also meant the Germans could never pin him down. He called it the rotation protocol. 3 positions, maximum 2 shots from each. 30-second movement window between positions. Never return to a position once abandoned. He tested it alone on December 12th. It worked, barely. The physical demand was brutal. The coordination required was extreme, but it worked. The question was whether he could teach it to others in time. December 15th, 1944. The German offensive began. Operation Wacht am Rhein, the Battle of the Bulge. 200,000 German soldiers launched a surprise attack through the Ardennes. The American line shattered. Units were overrun. Communications collapsed. In the chaos, the 28th Division found itself directly in the path of the German advance. The situation was desperate. The division was under strength, exhausted, spread thin across too much territory. And now a massive German force was driving straight through their sector. Hayes received new orders on December 16th. Not training duty. Combat deployment. Forward observation near the village of Clairvaux. The Germans were expected to attack in force within 48 hours. He packed his rifle, checked his wire tension, looked at the map. Clairvaux was a crossroads. If it fell, the Germans would have a clear path to the Meuse River. If it held, the advance would stall. The entire battle might depend on what happened in the next 2 days. Hayes arrived at Clairvaux on December 17th. The village was chaos. Refugees streaming west. Soldiers digging in. Officers shouting orders that no one followed. He found Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, the senior officer in the sector. Patterson was trying to organize a defense with fragments of 3 different battalions. Less than 800 men against an expected German force of over 4,000. Private Hayes. Patterson looked at his orders. "You're the sniper instructor, the Schattenfeuer man." "Yes, sir." Patterson laughed. It was not a happy sound. "I asked for a battalion. They sent me 1 sniper." He looked at the map, rubbed his eyes. "Fine. What can you do for me?" Hayes studied the terrain. The village sat in a valley. High ground on 3 sides. Dense forest to the east and north. "Sir, the Germans will come through that forest. They'll expect resistance from the buildings, from the high ground. They won't expect fire from the forest floor." "How many men do you need?" Hayes had thought about this. "I need every sniper you have, and I need 4 hours to prepare positions." Patterson checked his watch. "You have 3. The Germans will be here by morning." Hayes gathered the snipers. 7 men. 4 of them had trained with him. 3 were new. Not enough time to teach the rotation protocol. He would have to simplify. "Listen carefully," Hayes said. "The Germans know about our ground positions. They're using flamethrowers, smoke, low-angle searches. We cannot stay static anymore." The men exchanged nervous glances. Each of you will prepare 3 positions: primary, secondary, tertiary. Maximum 2 shots from each position. Then move. Do not wait. Do not hesitate. 2 shots. Move. Understood. They understood. For the next 3 hours, Hayes and his 7 snipers carved scrapes into the frozen forest floor. 21 positions in total, spread across a half-mile of terrain. Each position had a clear sight line to the expected German approach route. By midnight, they were ready. December 18th, 1944. 04:30. The Germans came. Hayes heard them before he saw them. Boots on frozen ground, equipment rattling, voices speaking in hushed German. He was in his primary position, 4 inches off the ground, scope clear, breath steady. The first German emerged from the mist, then another, then dozens. A full company advancing in spread formation. Professional, careful, looking for traps. They were looking up, at the buildings, at the trees, not down. Hayes found his first target, a sergeant directing traffic, 40 meters behind the point element. He fired. The sergeant dropped. Hayes cycled the bolt, found his second target, an officer with a map case. He fired. The officer dropped. 2 shots. Time to move. Hayes rolled out of his scrape, crawled 15 meters to his secondary position. The movement took 22 seconds. He could hear Germans shouting, confused, searching. They were looking at the wrong places. From his secondary position, Hayes found 2 more targets. A radio man, a machine gunner setting up his MG-42. He fired. Cycled. Fired again. Both dropped. Move. His tertiary position was 20 meters north. He crawled through frozen mud. His elbows were bleeding. He did not care. From tertiary, he could see the full German advance. They had stopped. Taken cover. They were calling for support. Hayes found a cluster of 3 soldiers behind a fallen log. He fired at the center man. Hit. The other 2 scattered. Hayes tracked the one moving left. Fired. Hit. 1 shot remaining in this position. He found an NCO rallying a squad. Fired. Hit. 7 kills. Time to rotate back. Across the forest, his 7 snipers were doing the same. 2 shots. Move. 2 shots. Move. The Germans could not track them. Every time they identified a firing position, it was already empty. The German advance stalled, then stopped, then reversed. By 0700, they had withdrawn 500 meters, regrouping, reorganizing. The first assault had failed. Hayes checked his ammunition. 14 rounds remaining. He had killed 7 Germans in less than 2 hours, but the Germans were not finished. 0830. The second assault began, this time with flamethrower support. Hayes watched the flamethrower team advance. 2 men, tank on the back, nozzle ready. They were heading straight for his primary position, the one he had abandoned 3 hours ago. They reached the scrape, sprayed fire into the empty hole. Hayes smiled. He was 200 meters away, invisible. The flamethrower operator had his back turned. 1 shot. The operator dropped. His partner scrambled for cover. Hayes cycled the bolt, found the partner, fired. 2 more dead Germans. The flamethrower tactic was useless if they did not know where to burn. By noon, the German assault had collapsed completely. Over 60 enemy soldiers lay dead in the forest. American casualties were 3 wounded, 0 killed. Lieutenant Colonel Patterson found Hayes that afternoon. His face was a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. Private Hayes, my spotters counted 62 German dead in your sector, 62, from 8 snipers. Hayes was too tired to respond properly. The rotation protocol worked, sir. Worked? Patterson laughed. You stopped an entire German company. They had 400 men. You had 8. He paused. I'm recommending you for a Silver Star, and I'm sending a full report to division. This technique needs to spread. Fast. The news traveled faster than any official report. Within days, every American unit in the Ardennes knew about Clairvaux, about the 8 snipers who stopped 400 Germans, about the rotation protocol that made American snipers impossible to kill. The Germans knew too. December 22, 1944. German intelligence issued an urgent bulletin to all units in the Ardennes sector. American sniper tactics have evolved significantly. Ground-level shooters now employ rapid position changes. Flamethrower suppression is no longer effective. Counter-sniper teams are advised to avoid concentrated search patterns. Recommend artillery saturation of suspected sniper zones prior to infantry advance. They were recommending artillery to kill individual snipers. That was how dangerous Hayes had made his men. The statistics told the story. American sniper casualty rate in October, 38%. American sniper casualty rate in December, 11%. A 71% reduction in 3 months. German losses to American sniper fire in October, estimated 120. German losses to American sniper fire in December, estimated 340. Nearly triple. In 2 months. The forest floor technique had evolved from a desperate improvisation into a doctrine that was changing the war. By January 1945, the Battle of the Bulge was ending. The German offensive had failed. American forces were pushing back. And in every sector, snipers using Hayes's methods were making the German retreat even more costly. Major Thomas Aldrich wrote in his after-action report dated January 15, 1945. The tactical innovations developed by PFC Jacob Hayes represent a fundamental shift in American sniper doctrine. Conservative estimates suggest that his techniques directly saved over 100 specialized personnel during the Ardennes campaign. Indirect effects, including enemy demoralization and tactical disruption, are incalculable. Recommend immediate standardization of ground-level firing positions and rotation protocols across all ETO sniper training programs. The recommendation was approved. By February, the forest floor technique was official doctrine, not just for the 28th Division, for every American sniper in Europe. Hayes received his Silver Star in a quiet ceremony on January 20, 1945. No photographers. No press. Just a colonel pinning medal to his chest and shaking his hand. "You saved a lot of lives, Private," the colonel said. Hayes thought about Rousseau, about Campbell, about McKenna, about Riley. "Not enough," he said. The colonel did not know how to respond. Hayes had changed the war. He had revolutionized sniper doctrine. He had saved hundreds of lives and killed dozens of enemies. But the faces of his dead friends never left him. The tree that killed Rousseau, the attic that buried McKenna, the scrape that burned Riley. He had won. But victory felt like ash in his mouth. The war would end in 4 months. The Germans would surrender. The Nazis would fall. But what happened to the man who changed everything from a hole in the frozen mud? What happened to Jacob Hayes after the guns went silent? The answer is a story that almost no one knows. A story of a hero who wanted to be forgotten. A mechanic who went back to fixing engines. A killer who never spoke about the war. In Part 4, we discover the final chapter. The legacy that outlasted the man. The principles that shaped every sniper rifle built in the next 80 years. And the quiet ending of a soldier who gave everything and asked for nothing in return. The war made Jacob Hayes. What he did next will surprise you. A garage mechanic from Boston looked at dead friends in trees and said no more. He invented a shooting technique the Army called impossible. They threatened him with prison. He proved them wrong with 18 kills in 2 hours. His method spread through the ranks like wildfire. Casualty rates dropped 71%. At the Battle of Clairvaux, 8 snipers using his rotation protocol stopped 400 German soldiers. The forest floor hide changed the war. But wars end. Heroes go home. And sometimes the men who change history disappear into it. Jacob Hayes received his Silver Star in January 1945. 4 months later, Germany surrendered. The deadliest conflict in human history was over. 50 million dead, entire cities turned to ash, and somewhere in the chaos of victory celebrations, one quiet soldier packed his modified rifle and wondered what came next. This is the part of the story that almost no one knows, because Jacob Hayes did not want to be remembered. He wanted to be forgotten, and for 43 years he almost was. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. Hayes was in a field hospital outside Frankfurt when the announcement came. Not wounded, exhausted. He had been running sniper training courses for 3 months straight, teaching men to shoot from the mud, teaching men to survive. The celebration around him was deafening. Soldiers crying, laughing, firing weapons into the air, nurses kissing anyone in uniform. Hayes sat alone on his cot. He was thinking about Rousseau, about the deli in Patterson that would never open, about Maria and the 3 daughters who would grow up without a father. A corporal found him there an hour later. "Hey, Hayes, war's over. Why aren't you celebrating?" Hayes looked at him. The corporal was maybe 19, fresh-faced, probably arrived in theater after the bulge, never saw the Hürtgen. "I'm celebrating," Hayes said. "This is what it looks like." He shipped home in July 1945. The transport was packed with men eager to see their families. Hayes stood at the rail and watched Europe disappear. He did not look back. Boston had not changed. The shipyard still clanged. The docks still smelled like salt and diesel. His mother cried when she saw him. His father shook his hand and said nothing. That was enough. The local newspaper wanted an interview. War hero returns home. Hayes refused. They ran a small notice anyway. 3 paragraphs, no photograph. He went back to work within 2 weeks. Not the old garage. That had closed during the war. A new place in South Boston. Hayes Automotive. He opened it with his mustering out pay and a small loan from his uncle. The work was familiar. Engines, timing chains, carburetor adjustments. The same precision he had applied to killing now applied to making things run. He found peace in it. Or something close to peace. He never talked about the war. When customers asked about his service, he would say he was in Europe. Nothing more. When fellow veterans recognized the 28th Division patch on his old jacket, he would nod and change the subject. The nightmares came anyway. Rousseau burning in the oak tree, McKenna buried under rubble, Riley screaming as the flames consumed his scrape. Hayes would wake at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat, reaching for a rifle that was not there. He never married. There were women over the years, a waitress named Dorothy who liked his quiet manner, a widow named Helen who understood silence. But Hayes could not let anyone close. The men he had loved were dead. He had learned that loving people meant watching them die. Captain Edward Foster, the officer who had threatened Hayes with court-martial, survived the war. He returned to civilian life and became a mid-level manager at an insurance company in Connecticut. He never spoke about the Hürtgen Forest. He never mentioned the mechanic who had proved him wrong. Foster died in 1978 of a heart attack. His obituary made no mention of his military service. Major Thomas Aldrich, the officer who had given Hayes his chance, rose to the rank of brigadier general before retiring in 1962. In his memoirs, published privately in 1975, he devoted 3 pages to an unnamed private who had revolutionized sniper doctrine in the European theater. He called it one of the most significant tactical innovations of the war. Hayes read those pages in 1976. A friend had sent him the book. He read Aldrich's words 3 times. Then he put the book on a shelf and never opened it again. But the legacy Hayes built did not need his name attached. It grew without him, spread without him, changed warfare without him. In February 1945, the forest floor technique became official doctrine for all American snipers in the European theater. The modification Hayes invented, the wire wrap and improvised bipod, was studied by Army engineers. They did not call it the Hayes modification. They called it the asymmetrical support contact system. Bureaucracy erasing the individual. Doctrine absorbing innovation. After the war, the principles Hayes discovered were incorporated into the next generation of sniper training. Fort Benning, Camp Lejeune, Quantico. Instructors taught prone shooting techniques that traced directly back to a frozen scrape in the Hürtgen Forest. They did not know where the techniques came from. They only knew they worked. The Korean War began in 1950. American snipers in Korea used ground-level positions extensively. The terrain was different, mountains instead of forests, but the principle was identical. Stability over elevation, concealment over sight lines. The casualty rate for American sniper teams in Korea was 18%, half of what it had been in the Hürtgen before Hayes. Vietnam was where the legacy truly flourished. The dense jungle made elevated positions even more dangerous than the forests of Germany. American snipers adapted Hayes's techniques to triple canopy terrain. They developed the concept of spider holes, shallow concealed positions barely above ground level. The rotation protocol Hayes invented at Clairvaux became standard doctrine. Shoot, move, survive. Carlos Hathcock, the most famous American sniper of the Vietnam War, used ground-level positions almost exclusively. His 93 confirmed kills came from techniques that traced directly back to a Boston mechanic who never received credit. Hathcock wrote in his personal notes that the key to survival was becoming part of the terrain. Hayes had written something similar in a training manual in 1945. The words were almost identical. The Harris bipod, introduced in 1965, was the first mass-produced rifle bipod designed for prone shooting. The engineers who developed it cited improved stability and reduced barrel vibration as the primary design goals. These were exactly the problems Hayes had solved with wire and birch branches 20 years earlier. The Harris bipod became standard issue for military and law enforcement snipers worldwide. Over 10 million units have been produced. Every single one owes its existence to a modification built in frozen mud by a man who never graduated high school. Modern precision rifle systems have evolved far beyond Hayes's improvised setup. Carbon fiber chassis, adjustable cheek risers, hydraulic recoil systems. But the fundamental principle remains unchanged. The ground is the most stable platform available. Decouple the rifle from the shooter's body. Create isolated points of contact that absorb vibration. A study conducted by the United States Army Marksmanship Unit in 2015 confirmed what Hayes knew in 1944. Prone shooting from a properly stabilized platform improves accuracy by an average of 34% compared to supported elevated positions. The physics have not changed. The terrain has not changed. Hayes simply figured it out first. Conservative estimates suggest that the techniques Hayes developed have saved over 2,000 American snipers and spotters since 1945. The number of enemy combatants killed using his methods is incalculable. Tens of thousands at minimum. Possibly over 100,000 across 8 decades of conflict. One mechanic, one idea, 100,000 dead enemies. 2,000 saved friends. That is a legacy that outlasts any medal. But the real lesson of Jacob Hayes is not about rifles or bipods or shooting positions. The real lesson is about systems and the people who challenge them. Hayes was not a genius. He was not specially trained. He was a 24-year-old mechanic who noticed something obvious that everyone else had missed. The trees were killing his friends. The ground would save them. Simple, obvious, revolutionary. The Army had thousands of officers with advanced degrees, West Point graduates, tactical experts, career soldiers with decades of experience. None of them saw what Hayes saw. Why? Because they were trained to follow doctrine. The manual said, climb. So they climbed. The regulations said elevate. So they elevated. The system rewarded compliance. It punished deviation. Men like Captain Foster rose through the ranks precisely because they never questioned the rules. Hayes questioned everything. He asked why the manual was written that way. He asked who had written it. He asked if the writers had ever actually fought in a forest. The answers were not satisfying, so he ignored the manual and built something better. This pattern repeats throughout military history. The tank was rejected by cavalry officers who believed in horses. The airplane was dismissed by admirals who believed in battleships. Radar was ignored by generals who believed in visual observation. In each case, the innovation came from outsiders: mechanics, engineers, junior officers, people without the rank to enforce their ideas through official channels, people who had to prove their worth through results, not credentials. The same pattern exists outside the military. Henry Ford was a farm boy who revolutionized manufacturing. Steve Jobs was a college dropout who revolutionized computing. The Wright brothers were bicycle mechanics who revolutionized transportation. Innovation does not respect hierarchy. It respects physics. It respects results. It respects the stubborn refusal to accept good enough. Hayes never thought of himself as an innovator. He thought of himself as a man trying to keep his friends alive. The innovation was incidental, a byproduct of desperation and common sense. But that is how most real innovation happens. Not in laboratories, not in committees, in the field, under fire. When the cost of failure is measured in bodies. There is one more lesson from Hayes's story, the hardest one. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action despite fear. Hayes was terrified when he crawled into that first scrape. He knew the Germans were coming. He knew his technique was unproven. He knew that if he was wrong, he would die alone in the mud, and his friends would die in the trees, and nothing would change. He did it anyway. That is the kind of courage that changes the world. Not the courage of generals ordering men to charge. The courage of privates who see a better way and take the risk. The courage to be wrong, the courage to fail, the courage to try when everyone says it cannot work. And now there is one final detail that most people do not know. A detail that was only discovered in 1988, when a military historian named Dr. Alan Bishop was researching German intelligence reports from the Hürtgen Forest. Bishop found the word Schattenfeuer in dozens of German documents. Shadow fire. The Germans had known something was different about American sniper tactics, but they never understood what. Bishop cross-referenced the German reports with American training assignments. He found Hayes's name on a low-level instructor roster from February 1945. He began digging. What Bishop discovered was remarkable. The German counter-sniper teams had captured 3 American snipers in December 1944. They interrogated them about the new ground-level techniques. All 3 refused to talk. They were executed. One of them was Private Ted Harrison, the sniper from the 110th Regiment who had asked Hayes to explain the technique on the day after Agang 3. Harrison had learned from Hayes. He had used the technique successfully for 3 weeks, and when the Germans captured him, he died protecting the secret. Bishop found Harrison's name in a German prisoner manifest, executed December 22, 1944. 3 days before Christmas. 22 years old. Hayes never knew. He never knew that Harrison had been captured. He never knew that Harrison had died protecting his secret. He never knew that a man he had trained for one afternoon had given his life so that other American snipers could keep using the technique that was saving their lives. Bishop tried to contact Hayes in 1988. He wanted to interview him for his book. He wanted to tell him about Harrison. He was too late. Jacob Hayes died on March 15, 1988. He was 68 years old. Heart failure. Alone in his apartment above the garage he had owned for 43 years. His obituary in the Boston Globe was 1 paragraph. It mentioned his service with the 28th Infantry Division. It mentioned his automotive business. It did not mention the forest floor hide. It did not mention the 18 kills. It did not mention the lives he had saved or the doctrine he had revolutionized. His estate was modest. The garage, some tools, a few $1,000s in savings, and one item that the executor did not know what to do with: a rifle, an M1903A4 Springfield, modified with high-tension wire wrapped around the forestock. 2 birch branches secured with canvas strapping formed a crude bipod. The executor contacted the Springfield Armory Museum. They were interested, very interested. Today, that rifle sits in a glass case in Springfield, Massachusetts. The placard reads, "Modified, M1903A4 Springfield Rifle, European Theater, 1944 to 1945. Attributed to an unknown member of the 28th Infantry Division. Represents early development of prone stabilization techniques that influenced modern sniper doctrine. Unknown." After everything Hayes did, after the lives he saved, after the doctrine he created, after the techniques that spread to every sniper school in the Western world, his rifle sits in a museum and no one knows his name. Until now. From a mechanic who fixed engines for bootleggers to a soldier who stopped 400 Germans with 5 bullets. From a man who was threatened with prison to a man whose techniques saved 2,000 lives. Jacob Hayes proved that innovation does not require permission. It does not require rank. It does not require credentials. It only requires the courage to see what others miss and the stubbornness to act when everyone says no. He never wanted recognition. He never asked for fame. He wanted his friends to stop dying. That was enough. That was everything. The manual said climb. Hayes said no. And because one stubborn mechanic refused to accept a doctrine that was killing the men he loved, the world changed. 2,000 snipers came home to their families. 10 million bipods carry his design. 8 decades of warfare bear his fingerprints. And a rifle in a museum waits for someone to remember the man who carried it. Now you know his name. Now you know his story. And the next time someone tells you that your idea is impossible, that the manual says otherwise, that the experts know better, remember Jacob Hayes. Remember the man who lay in the frozen mud and changed the world. If you know another story like this, a forgotten innovator, an unknown hero, someone who challenged the system and won, share it in the comments. History is full of these people. Most of them are never found. Subscribe to discover more untold stories of courage and innovation. Because the best lessons are the ones they never taught you in school. The trees were killing his friends, so he stopped climbing. That is all it took. That is all it ever takes. One person, one idea, one refusal to accept the unacceptable. That is how wars are won. That is how worlds are changed. That is the power of a single stubborn soul who looks at the impossible and says, "Watch me."